Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the various parties wanted to take action on the looming energy price increases as the Liberal Democrats and the CBI join in the calls for urgent remedies. And Rishi Sunak, the guy who as Chancellor resisted offering support of any kind in spring, is now calling for action to protect those on low wages, if you'll believe that. In fact, the only people not calling for action seem to be the current and likely next Prime Minister. That's how messed up we are. The only people not wanting to do anything are the only people who actually can do something. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So just to explain how serious this situation is, and bearing in mind it is against a background of higher fuel and food prices as well. We'd been used for a while for typical energy bills to be, about £100 a month, as a typical bill. Right now, it's a bit over £150 for a typical household bill. In the last year, energy bills have increased by over 50%. And this was so bad that the government were forced to offer up substantial support, albeit months after opposition parties all called for action. Well, the energy prices are increasing again this October. They knew that would happen. That was sort of factored in with the support before. And they know it's going to go up again this January. But it's going to go up much higher than they planned for. You know, come the new year, the current expectation is that energy bills will have gone up 250% compared to last year. Now, it shouldn't take a lot of working out, but if a 50% increase was a major problem, what on earth do we think a 250% increase is going to do to millions of modest household budgets? And as I say, at a time when other essentials are going up as well. And although things may ease off a bit later next year, and I don't know that's the case, but let us say, the prices aren't coming back down to where they were. I've seen no forecast that says, oh yeah, we're going to get back down to the £1,200 a year situation. No. The immediate future, the foreseeable future, is one which means shortages of fuel and food, caused by a number of factors, some of which were the result of government policy, such as Brexit, cancelling the moves towards renewables put in place by the last Labour government. We'd almost be self-sufficient if they'd have been carried on. Selling off our gas reserves a few years ago, that might not have been the smartest move either. But regardless of the causes, it means higher costs without the government intervening to put price controls in place. People are already behind on their energy bills because the price rises so far have been huge and the government didn't prepare in advance. They didn't allow people to make decisions. You know, bear in mind, the situation would be solved much more easily if the government acted quickly so that people who are facing unaffordable bills would be better prepared. They'd know how they were going to be able to manage it ahead of time. But when the help did come, it was the bare minimum needed to stave off falling poll ratings, because that's what this is about. It's making sure, you know, that the problem doesn't cause damage to the Tories' reputation that lasts until the next election, as was the case for Partygate. That's all it's about. That's all the Tories are worried about. They're not worried about people paying their bills. They're worried about what it's going to do to their poll rating. And absolutely everyone is urging the government to act now, not later, not, oh, the bills don't rise till October, so let's wait till. No, they need to act now. You know, that consumer groups and other political parties are urging this is no surprise. But even the CBI, which represents businesses, they're saying the government needs to help and that it will be too late if they wait for the next Prime Minister to be in place. I'd already talked a few days ago about how Gordon Brown, who's the former Labour leader and Prime Minister, suggested that Johnson, Truss and Sunak just get together to work on an agreed plan. This gets past Johnson's excuse that an outgoing Prime Minister shouldn't make major fiscal policy changes. Well, don't. Get your possible replacements in to agree and then you can. The current Labour leadership have reiterated their calls to cancel tax breaks for oil companies and cancel VAT on energy. They've also said they're going to be presenting a more comprehensive plan later. The Liberal Democrats yesterday called for Parliament to be urgently recalled so that they can vote to completely cancel the upcoming energy bill increases by expanding the windfall tax. This would be the windfall tax that both Labour and the Lib Dems called for at the start of the year, and the government only agreed 2 months later. But even then, made an arse of it. Like when it was first announced, I thought, wow, this is too good to be true. A Tory government applying a windfall tax. I can't believe they've actually done it. And it's going to raise £15 billion. Oh, wow, that's yeah, that'll do it. Only that's not what it really was. When people picked through the details, turned out it wasn't that at all. Because although in theory it was a windfall tax that would raise £15 billion, it also included £10 billion worth of extra tax breaks. So you know how the Tories give to the poor with one hand and then take with the other? Well, the reverse is happening with the oil companies here. They were going to take from them in the form of the windfall tax, but then give almost all of it back in the form of extra tax breaks. So rather than actually raising £15 billion, it's expected to just raise about £5. Going to need a whole lot more than that to cover these expected price rises. There's been some party political argy-bargy in the media as well, all fairly silly, I think. So some Lib Dem supporters are trying to push the idea, yet again, the Lib Dems have got in before Labour with their plan to deal with the crisis. And I have seen some saying, you know, Labour are taking risks by being so slow with their own proposals. Now, I will say this. I think Labour are a little slow. They're a little bit too cautious. I don't think they need to be as cautious. They're in opposition at the end of the day as well. That's not a time to be cautious. And obviously, partisan, politically interested people will always suggest that their party of choice is the best. That's why they chose it. I'm no different, for example. But this particular argument's a bit pointless because, first of all, you know, people saying, oh, you know, if they're not careful, the Lib Dems will trump Labour. It's like Labour aren't in competition with Lib Dems. They're not competing with the Lib Dems. There's one seat in the entire country where those two parties are actually competing with each other. And that one seat's ultimately not going to make the difference when it comes to the next election. So even if the Lib Dems were completely on the ball and Labour were just getting left behind, zero political impact. As I said at the weekend, what's important for Labour is that they announce their plan before the Conservatives, because that's who they're mostly competing with. They are competing with the SNP in Scotland, but mostly in terms of reforms and government, it's the Conservatives. Secondly, Labour are working on a comprehensive plan. So they say. We'll see what it's like. This plan of the Lib Dems is basically what it is, what they're calling for is tax the oil companies more for the extra amount energy bills are going up by, and then use the money to cancel that price increase. Now, I'm not going to argue against the policy, but it's not exactly a comprehensive plan. And it doesn't need any thought at all to costing it. It's like, all right, what we're going to do, we're going to cancel the energy price increases. Okay, great. How are we going to cost it? Make the oil companies pay. Right, great. It's not complex, is it? Also, it doesn't address the longer term problems, because I don't know what Labour will announce, and maybe I'll be disappointed. Who knows? But what I'd like to see is not just a short term plan to let people dodge these price rises, but also some funding for longer term action. Right now, we're facing a future where not only is energy going to be in shorter supply, but one in which it's in our interest, our collective interest, to reduce energy consumption regardless of supply. So what if the plan included funding to, say, properly insulate homes? A really good levelling up type scheme to get everyone's homes decently insulated. That would reduce the need for as much energy for heating and cooling purposes. Doesn't solve the problem, but it deals with one aspect of it. We use too much energy to heat and cool our houses. What if they were better insulated? That's what I'd like to see, a combination of short-term and long-term action. And the third thing to note is as well, despite what some may think, there aren't actually any good solutions. Like you may think windfall tax on oil companies to wipe out the price rises. That makes sense. That's the obvious thing to do. And don't get me wrong, I'm going along with that because I've not heard anything better. But let's not pretend that it's an easy solution because it has problems of its own. When you've got very high inflation and are headed into recession, anything like that causes extra problems. It's what you might call one of the less terrible solutions. But when the economy is screwed from all sides, there are no good plans. Only those that are, on balance, better than other ideas. But past and present leaders of Labour, the CBI, the Liberal Democrats, none of these people get to decide government policy. Right now, there are two people who can directly influence matters. Boris Johnson and, being realistic, Liz Truss. Boris Johnson could choose to get his potential replacements together in order to act, as I say. Liz Truss is likely to become the next Prime Minister, but she is refusing to commit to any action at all. She first of all said, no, we're not going to have any more public spending to help with these energy bills. Sort it out yourself. I'll cut some taxes. How about that? Then she seemed to U-turn on that because it blew up in her face and said, oh, no, I'm not actually ruling anything out. Then she seemed to go back again by doubling down on her no more handouts policy. She's in a complete mess with her statements on this crisis. Absolute mess. She was interviewed and said that she wasn't prepared to write a budget in advance of becoming Prime Minister. But she also promised tax cuts on day one. That's what she said. Tax cuts on day one. Does she actually know what a budget is? A government budget is the government's plans for both taxation and public spending. And it's usually quite nice if they match up. So if she's going to have tax cuts on day one, that means she has to have a budget ready in advance. So she's making no sense at all. If you're going to have tax cuts on day one, you are doing a budget in advance. Oh, I'm not doing a budget in advance. Then you're not having tax cuts on day one, are you? I mean, I suppose we're going to have to prepare ourselves for that, the fact that she's just going to make no sense every single day. Ironically, it's Rishi Sunak who's now talking about strong action needed. The Chancellor, who had to be dragged kicking and screaming months later to any help at all, is now urging some fairly hefty spending to deal with this. Almost certainly because he now needs a miracle to win this contest. So he's probably now thinking, look, last desperate throw of the dice, I'm going to promise to sort all this out with big spending promises, which are totally against his nature. And if it doesn't work and he ends up losing, as is likely, he can get to say when Liz Truss makes a proper ass of it, I had the plan to deal with it. And you chose her. That's what you get. You know, that's what you get when you put a monkey in charge. He's pointed out that Liz Truss's plans for national insurance cuts don't actually help anyone deal with the incoming price rises, which is true, and won't help pensioners at all. And that's true. And that's a cardinal sin, that, for a Tory. Like having a fiscal policy that screws over pensioners, because that's their main voter base. But where we are right now is that there are, as I say, two people in the country who can do something to deal with this. And they seem to be the only two people arguing for doing nothing at all. Only it's simply not feasible. And I don't just mean not feasible for a government that wants to actually govern. I mean not politically feasible. Truss is going to have to reverse her policy on this. It really is just a question of whether she realises this now and she's just saying what she's saying for the purposes of the Tory leadership contest, in which case, despite what she is saying, she will be working on a plan to implement very quickly. Or she doesn't yet realise this, she genuinely doesn't get it, in which case she'll do herself and her party a great deal of reputational damage while she slowly cottons on. Within weeks of the next Prime Minister taking office, they're going to have to deal with a serious energy crisis in terms of both supply and cost. Further food and medicine shortages, travel problems, a healthcare time bomb, wide-ranging industrial action, maybe even a general strike. And that's without considering the potential for mass disobedience if she tries to push people too far. Think about what this winter's going to be. NHS melting down, power cuts, massive cost of the electricity you can't even get, huge increase in the cost of food, shortages of the food, industrial action. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.